mind, your heart. Let's have a school choice conversation. Open your eyes, your mind, your heart. Let's have a school choice conversation. Let's have a school choice conversation. Let's have a school.
Thank you for joining us on Choice Conversation. And in this National School Choice Week edition of Choice Conversations, we take a look at school choice, education, and faith in the age of COVID. Families in Louisiana and even around our nation are being challenged to ensure the education of their children, all while protecting their health and staying safe. Joining us for the conversation is Bishop Darryl S. Brister, pastor of the Beacon Light International Baptist Cathedral in New Orleans, and second presiding bishop in the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship International, and Dr. Joe Connelly, pastor of Bethany United Methodist Church in New Orleans. Thank you both for joining us for Choice Conversations. And
Thank
happy
you.
National School Choice Week as well.
Thank
Well,
you
let's
so much,
begin.
Monica.
Yeah, my pleasure. What have you been hearing from families during this pandemic as they try to make these incredible adjustments in how their children are being educated? And I guess we can start with you, Bishop Brister, because you're seeing a lot of work with children and younger age families.
Yeah, thank you again, Monica. And I'd like to say Happy New Year to you in this wonderful week of observance. This moment, the season in which we are living right now, I think the challenging thing is that there is no data for any area or aspect of our lives, whether it is through the religious sector, but more importantly, from our educational. I think it's challenging because we've never ever found ourselves as a people literally having to live week by week, month by month, and then hopefully not year by year. But as we continue to make our way through this global pandemic, so many families have been challenged with now the new adjustment, which now requires a greater involvement of their child's education now, because now they're having to, of course, study virtually. But then so many families are expressing the challenges that they have because their present living conditions are not even conducive for an educational environment. So we've got to pray, we've got to trust and believe God literally week by week.
And Dr. Connolly, what about multi-generational? We think of the child, we think of the parents, but what about if they're grandparents or even the community that might be concerned?
Yeah, Monica, and again, thank you also for this. What I'm experiencing is a lot of the grandparents who have become surrogate teachers. A lot of the homes had no computers, so we have a system that says, "Oh, now you're going to be forced to go into a virtual learning environment," and our system was not even prepared to provide laptops, computers, internet. We have a city that there's several places that do not have internet. So how can we effectively have education? Thank God we have started in this city looking at how do we have citywide internet access. Our school system here, Orleans Parish School Board, did provide 10,000 laptops to parents, but we have issues with that. And so as we go further into this pandemic, let's face it right now, it's not going away anytime soon. This is our new norm. So my question to folks is, and my statement is, don't tell me what we cannot do. Tell me how we can do it, and then let's figure that out. Grandparents have had to now go into learning how to do Facebook, learning how to do Zoom, learning how to have their kids sit there. Then we deal with the legal issues that we've seen here that are unprecedented. Now your house has become an extension of a school system. We are prepared for that. So we need to back up, take our time, and realize we're in this for the long haul. Families have been just decimated, but we still hold out hope.
And Bishop Brister, what assistance can the church, because the church has always stepped in I mean, if we look at
Yeah.
our history, always stepped in the most challenging times. But as this thing keeps evolving and moving, and we keep waiting and waiting and hoping, what can the church do?
Yeah, and see, Monica, that's the challenging thing, because what we understand is, first of all, when we look at the foundational structure of the church, a strong church is made up, first of all, of strong families. So when we have strong families, and then we are able to have strong churches, the strong churches are able to have a positive infiltration on the community. Now we can have a strong community, and then a strong city, and then a strong state. But when it goes back to the foundation of the family itself, to have a strong family that is affected in the midst of this pandemic, but then we are now going over to the next phase of the church, where the impact of devastation is just as great upon the church as it is upon the family. Because ministries like ours, again, we don't have any data for this. The month of January, we normally know what our annual budget is. We normally know what to believe and to trust God for. But all of us find ourselves literally in a strange land. But let me slide this in. This nation, and I think it is very apparent right now, this nation was established upon the words, "In God we trust." And unfortunately, here in America, we trust in everything and everyone but God. But I believe throughout this divine reboot, even as Dr. Connelly was mentioning, we are still yet hopeful, because in the midst of change, there's always chaos, but change is always good.
And Dr. Connelly, we call
Yeah.
this choice conversations, and we have conversations. Are you finding that school systems and school districts are talking to faith-based institutions to see how we can come together and have dialogue and
Well,
even some possible solutions?
yeah. I think they might have had some basic conversations, but let me say this. And I've talked to several pastors throughout the Orleans area, Baton Rouge area. 98% of churches plus, if not 100%, I won't say 100, but close to it, have space throughout the week that is not being utilized. Classrooms, computers. If our school system really sat back and understood that it's about the children, it's not about the dollar, we could have churches that serve as pod locations. Instead of having children that go into a classroom at the school system that is large, where you got 25, 30, 35 children there, and the exposure rate is high, that you would then close out a whole school. We could have pods of 8 to 10 children at a church, 1 or 2 classrooms, self-contained, provide lunch to be provided there. Churches have internet. Most churches have computers. Bring their laptops, so that if a child becomes positive, you're not closing down an entire school and all the other children. You're only quarantining 8 children and maybe 1 or 2 teachers. You can still do virtual classrooms. You could have a teacher at a set location who comes on virtual, and then have grandparents and volunteers from the community be at that church pod location, providing in classroom discipline and assistance. That conversation is not taking place on a large scale, and that could be done just like that with our churches. Strong churches, as Bishop said, would step up. We've always been here for the community. Why can't we use the churches now?
And Bishop Brister, what other types of solutions that perhaps people haven't been thinking about or discussing because we're so used to going into our silos and trying to figure it out through that limited view?
I agree, and even as Dr. Connelly was saying, I believe right now, Monica, you heard me make mention again as a divine reboot. The unfortunate thing with our culture and all that we're seeing again in our culture is, we as people, we become slaves to sameness, and we fight change because we love things to be the way that we are accustomed to them being. I think, even as Dr. Connelly was saying, is that that we will continue to express and bring individuals around the table that can bring about these unprecedented solutions because we're living in unprecedented times. We cannot use the patterns that we've used from the past because we find ourselves in a completely different season. So I'm just wide open to professionals, whether it is the educational or the religious sector, of us just thinking outside of the box and allowing, again, the central focus, which is the children themselves, of how we can be better effective to making it happen for them.
Well, those are some eye-opening things that you've both talked about. I'd like to check in with the feelings and the health and health and where your congregations and communities are, because again, you know, we not everybody can handle being virtual. Not everybody can handle having the kids and your business and different generations in the house at the same time. Not everybody can handle whether or not you're using the kitchen table for everything and what it was meant to be, and including what it was meant to be. What about the isolation? Have you noticed anything about how families, or they're expressing to you or sharing with you, or how they're feeling almost a solid year into this pandemic? I'll start with you, Dr. Connelly.
Yeah, I've spoken with a lot of families, individuals, and some business owners. And what we're helping them to really understand and do is this isolation is wearing on them in various ways that they've not seen before. The anger level, the frustration level that might have been here at a time, and you could have escaped outside or gone to the office or gone to the mall or gone to somebody else's house to get away from it, is not there. And so your only place you have is your house. About 3 weeks ago, I suggested to our congregation that they create a safe space, a worship space, carve out one room or a corner in their house that becomes their sacred place that they can go to. When they go there, nobody else bothers them. It's my place. I can go and scream and holler. I can laugh. I can cry. I can just get it off of me. For if I don't, we're going to see, and my fear, Monica, is we're going to see more family abuse issues on the rise. We're going to see more children being abused, more spouses being abused, not because of anything other than the pandemic and isolation. Finding ways, and the younger generation is leading the way of having these Zoom parties or Facebook watch parties and conversations and trying to find ways that we can interact. Our congregation has been on Zoom for 11 months right now. We interact there. It does not take the place of physical connection, but we can see each other. We can talk to each other. We can laugh with each other, and we're making it. But without that, the anger level and the frustration is going to be just astronomical. And I think the psychologists are talking about the long-term PTSD effects that we have no idea right now that we're going to be facing. And our children, just like post-Katrina, 10, 15 years later, we're seeing the psychological effects. We're going to see that in this pandemic as well.
And Bishop Brister, what are you noticing? And do you feel that even our congregants, those in our community, can even be bold enough to say, I need some help. I'm feeling so isolated. I'm feeling so stressed out and alone right now.
Yeah. These are, again, Monica, as you can imagine, I mean, even as Dr. Connelly is making mention, I am dealing with such a wide spectrum of needs. I mean, we have little kids who last year was in the first grade when COVID first hit. They're now in the second grade and they're discombobulated. What about last year, the student who was a junior, but now this year they're a senior? So half of their junior year, it's almost as if they are preparing to go to college and have almost missed 2 years of actual collaboration in what we have known to have been proven effective for generations. And then even as Dr. Connelly mentioned, well, before I jump from that, let me go to the parent who now has to work from home if she's privileged to still have the job. Okay, so they've got to work from home, but then they have to monitor and to ensure not one, but maybe two or three other kids in the other room who are school age. They've got to have lunch prepared. They've got to
The
be
breaks, all that.
break,
Yeah.
and
Everything.
almost every aspect that you can imagine. So, 2 years ago, I began to say to our congregation, the Lord said to me, everything you need is in your house. Now, this was 2 years even before the pandemic. I didn't understand what that meant, Monica. But then now, the time that we're living in now, I really believe, after being able to travel around America and travel around the world, like yourself and Dr. Connelly, when you begin to see people who are able to live on a fraction of what we think we can't live without. After going through Hurricane Katrina, we felt that we could endure anything if we could just have our home. So this, for most people, and I'm not, saying you should be stronger or weaker, but at least you have a home. At least you have a place where you can at least demand some type of privacy. But then we deal with the conflict now of individuals who've used to being ships in the night passing.
Yeah.
But now you find out that you are married to someone that you don't even like.
Yep.
And you never realize you didn't like that person because you're always so busy. Or now the kids are gone and no one else is there but you. So the spectrum of the impact is it's very challenging.
Any final thoughts, or you talk a little bit about that too as well, Dr. Connelly? You've been shaking your head and
yeah. We look at it, and as pastors, we have to be well. We have the weight of our congregations, the weight of the community, we have our families that we're dealing with. And when you take that added pressure, if we don't take the time and find an escape, Bishop will tell you during this pandemic, I have been pushing pastors to read more, read other books besides theology, expand the brain, expand the mind. I'm a James Patterson man. To go fishing, to play golf, to get outside the house, to find 2 or 3 fellow pastors and just have a conversation that's not about your church members. Learn one another. We have found in our congregation, and I shared this Sunday, because of Zoom, we have become closer as a congregation than we were when we were in the building. And Bishop can attest to this also. When we're in buildings, we really stick with our cliques. In a large congregation or a small congregation, 3 to 5 people is all we really know and have a relationship with. But now with Zoom, we're starting to learn more and more about our members because of that connection. Facebook has caused us to really go. I myself have been on Facebook more the last 2 months than I ever have since Facebook was out. I'm learning about people. People are learning more about me. It's because that desire and that need for communication, that social aspect, that if we don't create a way to do it, is missing. I'm getting ready to do a podcast, and I'll talk to you about it later on. Bishop knows about the power of tears and emotionalism, that emotional journey for men, and understanding how to be in touch with ourselves. And right now with the pandemic, it's time for it. If we learn to release ourselves through crying. And this is just not for women do it all the time. It sounds sexist, but it's not. Women know how to cry. As men, we don't. Medically, when we cry, we're releasing some bad toxins from our system that come out through our tears. What I've learned is that as men, if you don't cry, those toxins stay within inside. They can ruin the body. Well, if we don't learn to get in touch with ourselves emotionally and we don't cry and release it, then that anger, that frustration builds and builds and builds and builds until it comes out. The pandemic, I think, has just compressed that time span to where it's become closer. What might have taken us a month or 6 months now can occur within a week or less because we have, like Bishop said, you realize, and I've been with this person, but I really don't like being around this person. But if we're moving and we're passing, we're so busy working, we don't really get to know that person. And now all of a sudden we're thrust into having to know that person.
And nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. Well, before we go, I'd like to get your thoughts and your level of either hopefulness or optimism for 2021. And, where are we? What do you think? Some of you, Bishop Brister. Woo!
Yeah, I'm serious. This is when I say literally, this is oozing out of me. And I want to close, but Monica, this is going to be good for you because every time you and I talk, we have a wonderful way of connecting. Also with Dr. Connelly, and both of you are you'll see the interesting paradoxical connection of this. At the very beginning of this, when the CDC first said that we had to suspend all of our services, I believe it was the second Sunday in March. The Lord said to me three things. He says, this is a season of rest. He says, it's a season of reflection. He says, is the season of recreation. Rest, reflection, recreation. And I took that to heart, Monica. I knew when he said rest that it meant both physically, psychologically, mentally, emotionally. But then he said also reflection. And I believe that this is our time for us to be able to reflect and to extract some meaningful information and practices, perhaps behaviors from the past that we may be able to take into the future, but then some to leave behind. But then recreation. I am so guilty because before this pandemic, I was so out of balance as a pastor, a father, an apostle, a bishop, second presider, and everything and on. Because with all that I had going on in my life, I had no recreation.
That's right.
And it is so important that we take time to recreate. Because if there's no recreation, there is no recreation. Dr. Connelly, in the midst of this pandemic, I've gone fishing 3 times. We've gone fishing. I've never been fishing before in my life. This is my final word, Monica. I'd like to say to you, Dr. Connelly, to this wonderful audience, this is what God said to me. He says, don't waste this pandemic. Yeah. He said, don't waste this pandemic. He said, don't waste this pandemic. In 2 weeks, I'm getting ready to release my a new book, but I'm already halfway through another book. I'm writing, I'm reading, I'm resting, I'm reflecting, I'm recreating. It's not going to be like this forever, but we can't waste this moment.
Wow, that's powerful. And I'll give you, Dr. Connelly, the final word on how hopeful you are and what do you think we're going to bring into 2021 that we're going to leave behind in 2020?
Monica, I am extremely hopeful. The pandemic, take away the loss of life. That is, there's no words to be said about that. But I think from the pandemic, those that remain, we have an opportunity, and I have claimed that 2021 would be the year of overflow and anointing. The power that we have as individuals will be collectively put together with others. We have so isolated ourselves into our jobs, into the things that we do, that one, we lost who we were as individuals. We didn't know who we were. We've now found that our families, our family units outside of our spouses and children are having to come together in newfound ways. I believe with everything in my being that out of 2021, we're going to see Americans, we're going to see other nationalities, other groups come together and be stronger. We're resilient. Our congregation has understood the fact that we don't give up. There's a statement in the movie Jurassic Park, the number one. It said, "Life finds a way."
Yeah.
We will find a way to deal with this pandemic. We will overcome all the tragedies. Myself, I've been blessed during the pandemic. I was able to take the time, study for the Louisiana bar, pass the bar. I'm now a Louisiana attorney, all because of the pandemic. Before, I wasn't taking the time. I had the time. If we take the time that we're given, as Bishop has said, we can recreate brand new things. I hold out hope that 2021 will be nothing like 2020. And together we can make a better place for our children, for education, and for the world. Thank you so much for this
Oh, thank you
opportunity.
both. Congratulations on all the books that you're writing. Bishop Brister and attorney Dr. Connelly, thank you for being with us. It's been amazing. Thank you for your perspective. And thanks to all of you for joining us for another edition of Choice Conversations.
Thank you.
Open your eyes, your mind, your